All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Dan Johnson, president of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association, and I want to welcome you all back to the May episode of the WMCA podcast, The Road Ahead. We have a great show for you today. We are going to talk everything and anything legislative update, both at the state level and at the federal level, and we're very pleased to welcome in one of our partners from the American Trucking Associations. Well, I'll introduce her in just a minute. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that today's sponsor is Truck Country. And as a proud partner of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association, Truck Country understands what it takes to keep Wisconsin's trucking industry moving. From industry-leading Freightliner trucks to expert service and one of the largest parts inventory in the region, Truck Country delivers the uptime carriers depend on every day. With locations across Wisconsin and 24/7 support, they're committed to keeping your fleet on the road and your business running strong. Learn more or find your nearest location at truckcountry.com. We've had a pretty busy legislative session, both at the state and federal level. And as you've all probably been watching over the last 12 or 14 months, the trucking industry has really taken center stage on many issues, and with good reason. We have a new FMCSA administrator, we have a new DOT secretary, and of course we have a new president. And the focus on the trucking industry has been, it's been breathtaking, quite frankly. There is a lot of good that's been done over the last 12 or 14 months, but we know that there's a lot more that needs to be done. And also in the state legislature here in Wisconsin, for those of you who don't know, I'm a registered lobbyist for the state. I have the ability to talk to lawmakers and policymakers about things that are happening in the trucking industry here in Wisconsin. Sometimes they're not real sexy, they don't hit the headlines like other issues do, but they're important. And from our standpoint, from the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association, we are advocating on your behalf to make the trucking industry more manageable in the state of Wisconsin, and looking for things that, even on the small scale, will help your business and will help your company grow and expand, especially during some difficult economic times. So I'm going to touch on a few state issues, and then we'll jump into our federal legislation. So first of all, in December, there was a new law signed, Senate Bill 271, which will allow the use of camera monitoring systems in place of traditional side mirrors on commercial motor vehicles. And this is a meaningful modernization. These systems use cameras and in-cab displays to give drivers better visibility, reduce blind spots, and enhance safety, especially in tight urban environments or challenging weather conditions. And just importantly, this change ensures that Wisconsin carriers can adopt the same technologies already improved at the federal level while avoiding any unnecessary regulatory conflicts. So the bottom line was Senate Bill 271, better visibility, safer roads, more efficient operations. This was signed into law in December. It's a good thing because we have a split government. We have a Democrat governor and we have a Republican legislature. So anytime we can get things through the process, the legislative process is extremely difficult, even when all the stars are lined up. But when you have competing parties, if you will, it can be a little bit more of a challenge. So we're very happy to get that first one through. The second one, a little legal reform, tort reform, as you like to call it, Senate Bill 459, which was signed into law back in March. This reinforces Wisconsin's standards for expert witness testimony in civil cases. So what does that mean in practice? So it raises the bar for what qualifies as credible expert testimony, helping limited, speculative, or unreliable opinions that can drive up litigation costs and create uncertainty for businesses, especially trucking companies. And for trucking companies, this is a broader effort to address lawsuit abuse and create more predictable environment. It's about fairness, it's about consistency, and ensuring that decisions are based on sound science and real expertise. And again, it's not just for trucking companies, it's for any business going through any kind of lawsuit, to make sure that if you are an expert witness, that you are actually an expert witness, you know what I'm saying? So it's important. And again, this was another bipartisan bill that did get the support of the full legislature and the governor. And finally, This is a big one, a funding infrastructure program. It's called the Agricultural Road Improvement Program. This was created 2 years ago in the legislature at $150 million. And basically what this program does, as you know, Wisconsin we're an agriculture state. We're the dairy state, and very proud of that. And so we move a lot of product from farm to processors. And that's done primarily on county roads, on local roads, that they do get some damage from time to time from those trucks, but that is the nature of the business. So what this program does, it initially funded $150 million in 2023 and 2024. It was reappropriated in 2025, 2026 for another $150 million, which is fantastic. The program provides critical funding to improve those local roads that serve Wisconsin's agriculture industries. The latest update to, we just call it ARIP, to build on its original success by continuing direct funding towards high-need projects that improve safety, reduce wear and tear on equipment, and strengthen the supply chain. So for motor carriers, that means better road conditions, fewer delays, more efficient routes, especially in rural areas where that first and last mile connections are key. As of April 2026, the program has provided $200 million of funding for more than 120 projects across 15 Wisconsin counties, improving those roads that carry tens of millions of tons of agricultural products each year. So $50 million was released back in April, and later this fall, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation will be releasing another $100 million. And again, this was another bipartisan product for the milk haulers, for the cheese makers. It's a necessary goal and a funding project, not only for the carriers, but also for those local units of government who, quite frankly, most of their budget is infrastructure. And they've been struggling for a long, long time. And we're trying to solve some issues there. So hopefully the Agricultural Road Improvement Program will get more money to those local road projects and create a better infrastructure for all of our farm to processor products. And again, another bipartisan effort. This is something that the legislature was very active in pushing. We at the Motor Carriers Association and the Milk Haulers Association, we're also very active in pushing it along with our partners in the cheesemakers and the Farm Bureau and just about anybody else who is in the agriculture industry to push this forward. So another great win for Wisconsin. So that's the Wisconsin update. We are going to now switch to the higher level, the federal level, where there's been no shortage of activity. And we're very pleased to have one of our good friends and partners from the American Trucking Association, Alex Rosen. She's joining us today from beautiful Washington, D.C. And I was just there. So I was there a couple of weeks ago with our Call on Washington. That's the Wisconsin effort to go meet with our legislators. So Alex, welcome to the WMCA podcast, The Road Ahead. Thank you for doing this with us. When I asked Alex if I could a favor, she immediately said yes. Yes, I didn't even ask what the favor was. She said yes, I'll do it. So we're very, very happy to get her in here. And so Alex, first of all, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how long you've been with the ATA.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Alex Rosen. I'm the Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs for the American Trucking Associations. And that's a big mouthful to essentially say that I run ATA's Office of Legislative Affairs. So I'm the direct liaison between the American Trucking Associations and members of Congress. So my job is to make sure that good ideas are promoted on Capitol Hill and that we create a path forward for them. And perhaps now, more importantly, making sure bad ideas have their legs cut out from under them and we stop them in their tracks. So I've been doing this for about 8 years with ATA. Before I came to ATA, I worked for the Committee on Homeland Security in the U.S. House of Representatives. So I did border security before it was cool, before it was the talking point on Fox News, and transportation security. I personally find interesting the unique balance that must be struck with regulators to ensure expedited commerce while also ensuring maximum security and safety mitigation protocols. So that's what brought me to the trucking industry. There's no shortage of issues on Capitol Hill, but want to first quickly say Thank you to Dan for bringing your membership out to the Call on Washington program. It is hugely advantageous for us because I live in DC. I'm a part of the swamp, as they say, and I can speak legislative affairs to members of Congress. I know all the three-letter agencies, but it's a very different story when you have people back at home relaying the challenges that they face every day to supplement the bills that we're talking about on Capitol Hill. That's what really moves the needle. So your members taking the time and expense to share their stories with their entire delegation. It's a grueling day of going from meeting to meeting to meeting, right, sharing your stories, but it makes a huge difference because that's what gets the bills over the finish line. So thank you so much for leading the group and charging forward with that effort. And also congratulations on the wins at the state level. You said a little tort reform bill, and the hairs on my arm stood up because there is nothing little about tort reform. It is a very difficult hill to climb. So I guess I'm going to toot your horn and say what an amazing feat, especially with a divided legislature. It is nearly impossible, even with a uniform legislature, to go about this with a divided set of legislators. Really well done. That's a huge improvement for the industry. Making sure there's only expert witnesses available to or allowed to participate in legal proceedings is really going to reduce costs for the trucking industry. So great job, and thanks for leading that fight.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, Call on Washington, about how many states do that each year, roughly?
We're aiming for 50. I believe we had 38 last year. So we continue to break our own internal records. And as we continue to show the ROI, when you come in, good things happen, and we can demonstrate that through data. We're getting more folks to join. And we encourage folks to come out every single year because it's really important to stay in touch with your members of Congress and make sure that they think of the trucking industry first and foremost when something comes across their desk that could impact the supply chain. We want them to call you all first. And you coming in every year, make sure that happens.
Yeah, and it's not, so when we were there, it wasn't just us. Minnesota was there and Kentucky was there. So, it is a good opportunity to network with other states, have that conversation with them and what's happening in their state, and exchange ideas and war stories and all that good stuff. But yeah, I mean, if the weather is great, which it was for us, by the way, it's fantastic. But if it's a little warm outside or a little cold, it can be a bit of a challenge. But it's definitely, the shoe leather is worth it. And just getting out there and meeting with our congressmen and even the staff people. I mean, the staff are great. And I mean, I'm a former staffer myself, and I know that staff they're the gatekeepers, right? And I mean, sometimes it is more important talking to staff than the congressman or the senator, even though they're extremely important. But some of it's a lot of glad handing, and some of it is educational. They just have to understand that, at least from our perspective, we don't feel that the trucking industry is a blue or a red issue. We just, especially here in Wisconsin, we're a manufacturing state. We make things and we have to move things, and it's as simple as that. And fortunately, we have, like in the Senate, Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson, both are very, very open and been very, very helpful with our efforts over the many years. So, it's something that I always hope that transportation does cross-party lines, and I think that's why we do have success here at the state level and even at the federal level. So, like I said, a lot of stuff going on. I mean, it is like a whirlwind of activity at the federal level, and I'm not going to jump through everything, Alex, but I did want to touch on some things that I think a lot of our members are aware of, but they're kind of trying to figure out, what's being done to tackle some of these problems. I mean, you talked about some of the good things, but there's always the bad stuff that comes up that we're trying to either stop, and sometimes it's even more detrimental than getting something good through. But probably one of the big issues that we've talked about was cargo theft. And there's been a lot of activity. And I think somebody explained this during Call on Washington. They said, it's not like the old, that scene from Goodfellas where Joe Pesci just pulls out a gun and pulls the truck driver out of the cab and says, okay, move on, buddy. And they take his truck. It's not your grandfather's cargo theft anymore. It's extremely sophisticated. And so first of all, let's, tell our listeners about the problem, first of all, and then what the ATA believes is the solution.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you nailed it on the head. It's not your grandfather's cargo theft anymore. And it's certainly not. It's much more sophisticated. It's organized criminal theft groups who have identified that if you exploit the supply chain, if you exploit the movement of goods and where goods cross jurisdictions, you can evade police detection because that's one of the key prohibitors of information sharing is when we go to report. And this was one of the factors that allowed us to build out our coalition, where we realized it wasn't just trucking, it was rail, it was everybody in the supply chain. When you go to report to your local law enforcement, I've experienced a theft incident or a fraud incident, the local law enforcement will say, well, your cargo didn't exactly get stolen in our jurisdiction and the point of origin is actually in another state, so you need to go report elsewhere.
Right.
Or they'll point you to state law enforcement and they'll point you back to local law enforcement, or they'll point you to the federal law enforcement entities and they'll say, I'm sorry, but this doesn't reach the monetary threshold to warrant federal involvement, nor is there a nexus to terrorism, so it's not our problem. So it's not our problem has been the common response at all levels of enforcement. And it's not their fault either. It's just a cross-jurisdictional issue that's very complicated. And so we've had limited ability to report, which has made it very difficult in terms of data to really emphasize that this is a growing problem, because if we can't report, there's no data to support that this is a huge issue and growing every single day. So when we realized that our problem of reporting was the same in the rail industry, retail, and shippers and receivers, ocean carriers, everybody, we realized that a federal solution is necessary because the federal government is the only entity that has the resources, the skill set, and the reach to be able to coordinate resources, manpower in a really dynamic way to address the movement of goods across the United States. So we partnered up with all of those national associations and we advocated for a bill, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, that would create a center within the Department of Homeland Security to really take the charge for the federal government in organizing cargo theft investigations and prosecutions, as well as organized retail crime prosecutions and investigations. So this would serve as a central repository for all reporting. So everybody finally has a place to go and report these supply chain fraud and theft issues. And then the Department of Homeland Security, given their trade expertise, would be able to then dynamically apply resources, prosecutors to the places with the highest volumes of supply chain fraud and theft. So right now we're seeing really big upticks in California, in Texas, in Memphis in particular, Tennessee, and a lot in Chicago. But we know with most criminal activity, it's like water. It's going to move towards the path of least resistance. So it may be these states and localities today, tomorrow, but maybe the next day and the next year it shifts elsewhere. So we really wanted to make sure that the federal solution was dynamic to account for the fact that these are organized criminal networks. And going back to your comment, this is not your grandfather's cargo theft anymore. That is very true, because what we had before was straight theft. So this is your truck gets broken into when you're at a rest stop and a pallet goes missing. Devastating, but it's not really what we're seeing today. What we're seeing today is more infiltration within the supply chain. With the digitization of the supply chain following the COVID pandemic, we saw kind of a lot of other opportunities for bad actors to infiltrate the supply chain, to insert themselves into the supply chain and engineer the movement of freight, and oftentimes without ever having to actually set foot in the United States. So you can have some random person in their parents' basement in Serbia who's brokering loads, pretending to be a legitimate motor carrier or broker. And unfortunately, I mean, there are a lot of ramifications for this. You've got, with the stolen goods, the shipper who's out on the goods that they're trying to sell and get to market. You've got the motor carrier who unwittingly moves goods on behalf of a shady broker and doesn't get paid for it. And then you have the kind of black market growth, because a lot of these stolen goods are reintroduced into the black market. And that actually puts a really interesting and diabolical spin on the availability of food, because if we can't guarantee the authenticity of what is being purchased, and we can't guarantee the legitimacy of those products because of the growth of the black market, that's a really terrible reality for our food supply chain, for electronics. Most people think that these thieves are stealing the really high value goods. So electronics, PlayStations, TVs, that type of thing. But actually the top commodity stolen is food and beverage. And that's because it's very easy to steal. You don't have a serial number on an almond, so it's very difficult to recover those goods, and they're perishable. So you can eat them, they go away, or they just disintegrate and they become bad, stale. So we've got a lot of our agriculture partners who are very invested in our fight to combat organized supply chain crime, because as soon as a food product is tampered with over the course of the supply chain, it's unusable. It's been corrupted and they have to throw it away. And so that's been a huge threat to our food supply chain. The Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, because it's so widely supported, we have fabulous bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. In the House, we have over 200 co-sponsors. In the Senate, we've got over 40. We think that this is something that can actually get done this year. And I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm always thinking there's a path forward. I'm ever the fighter trying to find a new pathway if for some reason we can't pursue the original path. But with this bill, it passed through the Judiciary Committee unanimously by voice vote. Nothing passes through the Judiciary Committee. You go to the Judiciary Committee to fight and to kind of emerge bloody knuckled. But in this case, you had agreement among members of the committee that this is something that needs to happen. It's gone on way too long. You've got organized criminal groups who are really, in a sophisticated way, taking advantage of truck drivers, rail workers, and sowing violence and discord throughout the United States. So it's not like this is an issue that impacts only red states or blue states. It's everybody. And we're all paying the price for the higher price of consumer goods at the end of the day. So we are expecting that the bill will be considered on suspension in the House the week of the 13th, May 13th. So I believe that's next week. Next week. So either Tuesday or Wednesday. It's police week. So we're trying to figure that out now, make sure that everything is all squared away. But that's a piece of intel that we can share with your listeners. It's not widely known. But we got confirmation from the Speaker, House Speaker, and the Majority Leader that they want to move this. They see the value in moving CORCA, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. Now the question is what happens in the Senate. In the Senate, you have the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the Committee of Jurisdiction, is the sponsor of this bill. But in the Senate, they have procedures where one person can hold up a bill. They put a hold on it and everything pauses. So we've got to pretty much get consent from every single member of the Senate for this to move in the expedited fashion that we're trying to achieve here. So in the meantime, the ATA team and all of our supply chain partners are trying to make sure that when this House bill does go to the Senate for consideration, nobody's going to put a pause on it. Or more realistically, the people who are going to put a pause on it are going to yell and scream and shout, and they're going to do their thing, and then eventually they're going to pull it down so that this bill can be signed into law. And so I'm pretty optimistic. We have both the top Democrat and top Republican on the Judiciary Committee have signed off on the bill. Right. So things are trending positively, and I know this would make a huge difference for the trucking industry. The trucking industry loses $18 million worth of goods per day just due to cargo theft. And just due to the reporting issues that I mentioned earlier, we expect that number to be much, much bigger. So that's a very conservative estimate. So something that we can take home and yell about in a positive way once this eventually crosses the finish line.
Well, we could do almost an entire episode here just on retail theft. I mean, it is mind blowing. You say $18 million a day, and like you said, some of it goes unreported because it doesn't meet that threshold. We've had one of our members who had, like you said, she had I think it was Coca-Cola that was stolen from her, and it just, like you said, law enforcement is just, they're pointing the fingers in 9 different directions, and they're like, don't look at us, and then she ends up getting stuck with it, right, and has to pay for it. And that we need to do something about that cannot wait. So I am also the eternal optimist with everything, and good luck with that. We've shared our message with our legislators here in Wisconsin, and I know ATA is doing all that they can. Bon chance on that. All right. So another issue, we were talking a little bit earlier about lawsuits, and you're absolutely right. There's no such thing as small lawsuit abuse reform. And one of them that maybe people don't really see too much. I mean, we see the billboard attorneys, right? And here in Wisconsin, we've got we've got a handful of attorneys, and I'm not going to name anybody, but everybody knows who they are, and they're out there basically. They put a target on the back of the trucking industry, and this is something that has popped up within like the last 5 or 6 years, and all of a sudden the trucking industry is this horrible thing that's creating all this chaos out there, and the personal injury attorneys are going after them, and so one of the things that has been popping up that maybe people aren't paying attention to is frivolous lawsuits, and there's been a lot of abuse in frivolous lawsuits because I think there's this thought that they'll shoot their shot, right? And what ends up happening is that the trucking company ends up paying the price for that. So what are we doing about frivolous laws? We've talked about lawsuit abuse before with nuclear verdicts, but this frivolous lawsuit abuse, what is going on out there, and what are we trying to do to combat it?
Well, I'm so glad you brought this up. The cargo theft issue is my pet project, but now I've decided to take on the trial bar because this is a really fulfilling and really worthwhile endeavor. It is the biggest mountain to climb that I think I've encountered in all of my years in legislative affairs. It is a very difficult topic because it's a very well-funded topic. Our opponents have got a lot of money and they know how to use it very strategically, and we will never be able to compete with those types of contributions. But nonetheless, it is something that we have to fight because I think it presents an existential threat to the trucking industry. The frivolous lawsuits you mentioned, the trial bar had identified medical malpractice. That was their cash cow. And then you had regulations put in place to kind of curb that type of abuse. And they had to find another source of revenue, another cash cow, and they've sunk their teeth into the trucking industry. And it's an unfortunate reality. But our legal team, our awesome legal team, is working with our state trucking association partners, Dan, you and your colleagues, to identify some of the gaps in the state legislatures and help promote certain legislative fixes to address some of those gaps. But as we all know in the trucking industry, trucking is interstate by nature. We don't just operate within the confines of state lines. Right. We can't guarantee where someone might stage an accident with our truck. So while we may have protections in one state, it's not helpful unless we have that 50-state framework. So that necessitates a federal solution. And again, very difficult to address tort reform, just given the scope of the opposition and the well-funded nature of the opposition, but we have to pursue something at the federal level to really enact those protections that we're looking for. We're not looking for an advantage by any means. We are not seeking a way to make ourselves to get a more favorable position in court. We just want our fair day in court. And that kind of needs to be said at the outset. We currently have a big target on our backs because the trial attorneys and oftentimes criminal groups know that we have commercial insurance. So it's not that the trucking industry is uniquely dangerous. We're just uniquely profitable to sue. Mm-hmm. So the name of the game is get trucking into court, prolong that court proceeding for as long as possible, bleed out the trucking company, and force a settlement. That's the name of the game. And it's so lucrative that you have outside groups. You've got hedge funds, investment firms, sovereign wealth funds, even foreign governments that are all investing in highway accident litigation because they know it's a profit center for them. It's not about accountability anymore or justice for the trucking industry. It's about profiteering. And so we have to figure out a way to right the ship and make sure that we have our fair day in court because we're certainly not getting that. So we're pursuing multiple bills at the federal level. As a quick aside, we had introduced a bill last Congress that included kind of all of our legislative priorities in this big, long bill. And we loved it. It was great. And it would really help the trucking industry. But we weren't getting a lot of positive feedback about the bill. And as we took a step back and tried to figure out how do we progress this issue? Because if we're yelling and screaming about this in a void, we're not doing anything positive. This is not an effective use of our time. And we realized we need to get more members of Congress educated about lawsuit abuse targeting the trucking industry. And we need to amplify the voices of our coalition partners because there are a lot of folks in the trucking industry who can use their voices and perspectives to bolster the idea, the reality that we are being targeted. So we can't go at this alone. We really need to bring in those other groups who are similarly caught up in this lawsuit abuse. So what we did was we split that bill up into multiple smaller bills that are, one, easier to communicate with members of Congress. If we go in and we're speaking legalese for 45 minutes, eyes are glazed over, we've lost them.
Right.
So what we did was we tried to make it more digestible. And then with more bills, we have more opportunities for members of Congress to become our champions, to become educated in that kind of niche issue and then run with it. So we've got more champions in members of Congress to be able to promote, put them on a platform and enable them to talk about this. And then we also have more opportunities for our coalition partners to weigh in. So one of the unique things here is we've become pretty close with the agriculture community because they're experiencing third-party litigation funding. And we found kind of strange and unlikely partners in very unlikely places, but in the best way possible. So I'm happy to run through those bills quickly if that would be helpful, or if you want to jump to other topics. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're pursuing several bills in our tort reform portfolio. And I think all of them are very straightforward, but I can also give you a sense of which bills are most likely to pass where the opposition is. The first is simply making staging an accident with a commercial motor vehicle a federal crime. You would be shocked to learn that there are no repercussions for staging an accident with a commercial motor vehicle.
Right.
Best case scenario, motor carriers have this on camera. It's very clear that somebody intentionally brake checked in front of a truck and the case gets tossed out. Unfortunately, trucking still loses even though they won in that particular proceeding because they've had to pay for the cost to compile all of that video evidence, to have that lawyer on retainer. There's still costs associated with being hauled into court with these fraudulent schemes. And there's no recourse for trucking. So if you want to go after the people who staged the accident, you can't because they technically didn't commit a crime. So making staging an accident with a commercial motor vehicle a crime is not only a deterrent, but it also provides recourse so that motor carriers can recoup some of that money that they lost defending themselves against these fraudulent schemes. It not only targets the slammers, the people who physically crash their cars into trucks, but it also captures the attorneys and medical providers who conspire with the slammers to engage in these fraudulent schemes. So very proud of that bill. Seems really straightforward. We're getting a lot of uptick on that legislation.
Awesome. So, and that sort of dovetails that Louisiana case that was just some attorneys were just convicted. And that was, we talked about that last time at our call in Washington. I mean, it was a massive criminal organization that involved law enforcement and municipal judges. I mean, it's crazy. You've got not just people in the car who are slamming their vehicles into trucks, but you've got spotters, right, to act as witnesses. I mean, it is a very well organized, sophisticated crime organization because they just see dollar bills. And you know, the trial attorneys, they're creating this narrative that, you know, that they're getting millions of dollars from trucking companies, and you know, watch us get 10 million, 50 million, and people think, boy, that sounds pretty good. You know, I mean, why play the lottery when you can just, you know, get involved in a trucking accident and take our chances? So, yeah, I mean, that's some good work. So what else we got?
We also have legislation targeting forum shopping. So I'm sure many of your members and listeners have experienced improper joinder tactics. So bring certain folks into a case just so that the trial attorney can forum shop and have this case heard in a very appealing and helpful venue. So the point of it not being to achieve justice or accountability, but so that they can achieve the biggest settlement or the biggest verdict out of that case. So we are really trying to target judicial hellholes here and ensure that in cases where it's a very, very high stakes litigation, that case can be heard in federal court where the rules of procedure are a lot fairer. So what this bill does, the Fair Trucking Act, it would remove certain cases to federal court if 3 conditions are met. 1, the matter involves interstate commerce. 2, the amount in controversy exceeds $5 million. And 3, in a case where 1 defendant and 1 plaintiff are from at least 1 different state. So it would create a new path for diversity jurisdiction. So we're not trying to move to federal court to gain an advantage. We just want to make sure that if the case is in the potentially the millions of dollars realm, the nuclear verdict, we want to make sure that the rules of procedure here are fair and that trucking has its fair day in court.
Yeah. And, we use that term nuclear verdict, and of course that means something, obviously it's a nuclear verdict, but one of our members came up with another term. They call them hand grenade verdicts, which they're not as explosive as nuclear, but they do a significant amount of damage. And it's like, and this is, the thing, kind of like with the frivolous lawsuits, like you said, the trucking company gets dragged into court, they got to pay attorney's fees, and then it ends up getting thrown out. Well, they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars fighting this thing. And I think there was one company down in Texas, after 90 years, a family-run company, they just said, we're done. We've had enough of these bogus lawsuits coming at us, and they closed up shop. And I don't think people really understand like how detrimental that is to the supply chain, and that we can't allow that to continue. So we talk about nuclear verdicts, but we also got to watch out for those hand grenade verdicts.
I like the hand grenade verdicts. I've also heard thermonuclear verdicts, so I'm going to use all of these. But so you mentioned an issue that's been really candidly difficult to discuss on Capitol Hill. So people will ask, well, if you're innocent, why don't you just go to court? Why don't you just run the course of the trial? I mean, you're not guilty. You have evidence to prove it. And what they don't understand is that the tactics that the trial bar uses bleed trucking companies dry. And so you're forced to settle irrespective of fault. So all of these inflated settlements give the impression that for some reason trucking may just be exponentially more dangerous than it was 10 years ago. But it's just the case that the forum, the trial is fundamentally unfair. And when you have expert witnesses who put the trucking company's entire history on display, irrespective of the actual case, it creates this scenario where to defend yourself, to prove your innocence, you dry up your coffers, and that's just unsustainable. So trucking is considered guilty before proven innocent, and that's just not how the judicial system is supposed to work.
Exactly. Today's episode is proudly supported and sponsored by Truck Country, a Diamond Club Plus member of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association. Reliable trucks, expert service, and 24/7 support built for uptime. Visit truckcountry.com to learn more. Another big issue that came up, that's come up in several different variations. The president mentioned this during his State of the Union speech, and I think there have been about 9 different variations of what people have dubbed as Dalilah's Law. Mm-hmm. And we hear that and we're like, yeah, Dalilah's Law, I support Dalilah's Law. And then we realize there's about 7 or 8 different legislative versions of Dalilah's Law. And first of all, for the benefit of our listeners, first of all, who is Dalilah, and what was the situation that led to this, and where are we going with whatever iteration of Dalilah's Law that we currently have in Congress?
So Dalilah Coleman is a sweet little girl who unfortunately was tragically injured in an accident where an illegal alien was able to get behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound truck and struck her. So the impetus behind the president talking about this in his State of the Union address was, let's get justice for Dalilah Coleman. Illegal aliens should not be behind the wheels of giant trucks. And we completely agree. Illegal aliens, people who do not have proper work authorization, should not be able to get a commercial driver's license and operate on our roadways alongside our families. Full stop. This issue has taken on a life of its own in the media, and the narrative has been explosive. And one of the things that ATA does and our state trucking association partners do is really try to hone in on what is the legitimate problem here. What are the loopholes? What are the regulatory barriers or issues that are allowing these challenges to proliferate? And how can we target it? How can we target them and address them in a meaningful way so that we're actually enacting change that addresses the underlying problem rather than contributing to an explosive narrative? Right. So the accident involving Dalilah Coleman was fully preventable and horrible and tragic. So what we need to do is identify where are the breaking points that have allowed illegal aliens to obtain commercial driver's licenses. And there are, unfortunately, a lot of ways where that's been happening. So you have CDL mills that have been kind of like a pay to play. So pay us a lot of money and we'll give you a commercial driver's license. You're not getting the training and the testing necessary to demonstrate that you can operate safely on America's roadways. And then you also have states that are not fulfilling their duties to ping the federal immigration databases to ensure uniformity and alignment of work authorizations with commercial driver's licenses. So what that means is if your work authorization expires in February, your CDL should also expire in February, not in September. Yep. So there was kind of lax enforcement of that. And that, among a variety of other factors, allowed people to be improperly licensed. And when that occurs, you have people who are not necessarily safe, who have not done the requisite training and testing to be on our roadways. So Dalilah's Law, it was an attempt to close those loopholes. One of the bummers about how this played out, it was a very legitimate issue. The president raised it in his State of the Union, and then it was a mad dash to introduce this bill. And what happens when you have kind of a knee-jerk reaction from members of Congress is they introduce well-intentioned bills, but that have disastrous ramifications. So the first bill that came out less than 16 hours after the president raised it in the State of the Union was a bill from Senator Banks in Indiana. And that bill would have required all 3.6 million CDL holders to go and recertify their CDLs with their state driver's licensing agencies. It is very difficult as it is to go get an appointment at the state driver's licensing agency. So imagine all 3.6 million truck drivers having to do so. So right idea in making people recertify, but the population, the targeted population was way too big. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a meaningful way to address that. There are a variety of other issues with that bill. And then later on, you had a member of Congress, Representative Rouser, try to take this on in a very, very meaningful way. He's the head of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So he sought ATA's feedback and trying to figure out how to craft this bill in a meaningful but practical way. And he did a fabulous job in crafting the updated Dalilah's Law. So one of the things that he did, he addressed English language proficiency in that bill. And there are very strict penalties in this bill for noncompliance across the board. And what we wanted to ensure was that there were means for compliance, because if you have strict penalties for English language proficiency, but you have different enforcement, disparate enforcement in each state. You have a driver who passes ELP in one state and the neighboring state, but then they go to a third and they're deemed not proficient. That's an out of service order immediately. Right. So we want to ensure uniform enforcement. And one of the things that ATA prioritized in these negotiations was we need DOT to come out with uniform standards. We have to have each state approaching this topic in a uniform way. Additionally, the penalties for states who issue CDLs improperly and who do not enforce ELP properly, that was originally 100% of all highway funding would be removed. That is a very, very big stick. Yep. And that also implies highway safety dollars. So we certainly don't want to hijack safety money in enforcement of a safety issue. So we negotiated it back down, and I believe it's 8 and 10%. And then another piece to this too is liability for employers who employ people who have improper CDLs or who are operating illegally. And we certainly agree with that. Employers should not be employing people who don't have valid credentials to drive a truck. Right. But we also want to make sure that the employer is notified when somebody in their employ has had their CDL revoked, suspended, or anything in between. So one of the things that we advocated for in that bill was a bolstering of the employer notification system. So as soon as a state downgrades, cancels, revokes a CDL, the employer is immediately notified so that they can take appropriate action and remove that driver from the road. So because that penalty, I think, is like $25,000 for each violation, want to make sure that the employer has the ability to act before being penalized. So that was a very long negotiation with Representative Rouser's team. I think we got a really great product out there. It's implementable, it's enforceable, and that's really what we wanted. Because if you have a bill that's pie in the sky, great ideas, says I direct world peace, great, I would love that too. But if you can't enforce it, it's rendered useless. This bill can actually do something meaningful, and law enforcement's on board, industry's on board, and that's what we want with a piece of legislation. So we're happy to see that move through the process, and we expect that that should be included in the upcoming surface transportation reauthorization.
Awesome. I mean, and it really, it required people to coalesce around one, or I should say several different points. You know, like I said, there were many different variations of this, and just getting people to understand, okay, this is going to be the vehicle that moves Dalilah's law forward is so important. Because I mean, things can crash and burn in so many different ways, and you know, it's one of those things that this is one that we don't want to see like go away just because of some, you know, I don't want to say clerical error, but just sort of a miscommunication or whatever it is. If it becomes more about the personality rather than the politics or something, you know. So, I mean, we're going to keep watching that. I know ATA is going to keep watching that. So good work on that and so many other issues. I mean, there's a lot more that we could talk about here, Alex, but our time is running a little bit short. So, yeah, if there's anything that's, you know, any parting thoughts or comments you'd like to make, I'll give you the floor for about 30 seconds.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We're fighting on your behalf on Capitol Hill, but no, you've got the best of the best advocating for you at the state level. Again, that tort reform win, it is a very difficult hill to climb. So Dan, congratulations again on all three of those wins. That's huge. We're looking forward to surface transportation reauthorization moving. We expect, this is some intel, the markup is going to be on the 19th. So conveniently when we're at our annual conference, but that should be when all of our big priority initiatives, truck parking, having electric vehicles pay into the Highway Trust Fund, everything is going to be considered. So stay tuned for the 19th. And we're excited to kind of keep the ball rolling and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you for everything that you all do and your whole team, Sean and Chris and everybody and Henry. I mean, they're just fantastic people to work with, to partner with. We do our call on Washington, very knowledgeable, and they help our Wisconsin people get through the process. That's Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs with the American Trucking Association, Alex Rosen. Thank you so much, Alex. We are just going to wrap it up here, folks. We want to thank you for joining us here on the WMCA podcast, The Road Ahead. We are looking forward to our next episode, which will drop at the end of June, and we're working on some topics for that. And in the meantime, thank you again to our wonderful sponsor and our friends at Truck Country for taking care of us for this podcast. So until next time, I'm Dan Johnson, President of the WMCA. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great summer, and we'll see you again on the road ahead.